Let's now go to court matters, where it is remaining 9 days for Nigeria's opposition's People's Democratic Party (PDP) and its counterpart, the Labour Party, to file in their processes at the Supreme Court to appeal the judgment of the Presidential Elections Petitions Court, which upheld the victory of President Bola Tinubu at the 2023 presidential election. Both parties say they will be going to the Supreme Court to get justice and hope the tribunal judgment will be overturned. We have a report on this, but that would come. Let's quickly discuss with our guest to explore what the ongoing litigation over the presidential election is saying about our country's electoral process. I'm talking about senior advocate of Nigeria, Ebun Olu-Adegboruwa. Thank you very much for giving us your time.
Thank you very much for having me. My pleasure.
More than 3 months into an administration and 7 months after the election itself, the dispute over who won the election is still ongoing. Some are advocating, they're proposing an amendment to that aspect of the law to guarantee the completion of 4 petitions before a winner is sworn in. Are you part of those who subscribe to this line of argument, and what would be some of the challenges to implement such a line of thought?
Thank you. I believe that in Nigeria, the litigation process is quite very slow and can be a little bit cumbersome. But for those who are lovers of due process and rule of law, we have learned to do this in the way that will best suit the parties and the lawyers. Law requires painstaking research, an examination of the facts, and then proper review of the principles of law guiding those facts before the judges will come to a conclusion. Now, it is going to be difficult to be able to make a law that will require that all matters related to elections be concluded before the winners are sworn in. It's quite desirable, but in the light of the challenges we have in the court system, that may constitute a challenge to governance because there will be some vacuum in respect of that. What we have had in the past is that the person who wins the election temporarily takes advantage of that declaration because the law presumes that that declaration is authentic. It is a person who is challenging that declaration that will have the burden of overturning the election and then either getting a rerun or getting himself declared as the winner of the election. So the focus for me should be on the process of litigating election petitions, how to make it faster, how to ensure that there is effectiveness. First of all is to look at the roles to be played by the umpire, INEC, because whether you extend the time or you fasten or accelerate the process, if INEC is not cooperating with the petitioners and their lawyers by releasing materials on time, we will still come back to the drawing board. Secondly, is for lawyers to identify the legal issues involved in the petitions. And at times, if those legal issues can resolve the petition, they should be isolated and determined. For instance, in the 2 cases that were determined by the Court of Appeal in respect of the petition of Labour Party and the People's Democratic Party, there are salient legal issues that should have been isolated and determined preliminarily within a week. The issue of the status of the Federal Capital Territory, it's a matter of law. The issue of local standard of an opposition party to challenge the nomination of a rival party is a matter of law.
I think if I understand you, you're saying that the focus would be on getting the judiciary to actually sit up and expedite the process of adjudicating.
And also for us to get the electoral umpire to cooperate with the petitioners by releasing materials to them on time.
All right, let's look at that. Looking back at the court verdict last week, which upheld the result of the presidential election, one thing that's been talked about a lot is the seeming clean slate that was given to INEC by the court. You had expressed reservation on how INEC may have failed in her responsibility, and you just talked about the release of materials. Talk us through those things you wished that the court took judicial notice of in terms of INEC's performance during the election.
Thank you very much. The holding of the court in the petitions presented by Labour Party in particular is that INEC was not under any obligation to transmit results of election electronically, and that all the guidelines and statutes governing the conduct of elections in Nigeria cannot be said to compel INEC to embark upon electronic transmission. The court decided that manual transmission of results by INEC is appropriate and could not be a reason to overturn the declaration made by INEC. Yes, with all due respect, you recall that Nigerians and all stakeholders and lovers of democracy fought tooth and nail to amend the Electoral Act. And indeed, the issue of electronic transmission of results was a contentious matter that took the National Assembly several months to resolve. And eventually, the president assented to the Electoral Act 2022. So for a court in 2023 to hold that we should go back to manual collation and transmission of results, it will be that we have forfeited the gains of e-voting. We have forfeited the rich contributions and investment made into the production and enactment of the Electoral Act. I honestly believe within my mind that having regard to the problems we have had in the past relating to the intervention of human agencies in election administration and management, we should do all in our powers to deploy technology that will reduce the incidences of human intervention, especially in the collation and transmission of election results. Because indeed, that is the place where we have cases of rigging, cases of falsification, and manipulation. So for me, I thought that the judiciary has an opportunity to identify the lapses of the 2023 elections and help INEC to correct those lapses. And the reason why I say this is that it was INEC that made the guidelines voluntarily and gave an undertaking to the people of Nigeria that election results will be transmitted electronically and in fact real time. So if that organization then failed to honor that undertaking, having regard to the fact that we spent over 300 billion naira from the collective purse of Nigeria on that exercise, I thought that INEC should not have been allowed to run away with those lapses without any attempt being made to x-ray the conduct of the electoral umpire. So I believe that is an area where I thought that their lordships could have looked at the conduct of INEC and saved Nigerians a recall back to violence, rigging, and the manipulation of results.
All right, Mr. Olu-Adegboruwa, please. I want you to take a look at the burden of proof. You mentioned a little earlier that the burden lies with the person who is alleging. There are those who are suggesting that the dispute should be transferred to the institution. You just highlighted some of the things that they have done that you feel they could have done differently, that the judges in this case, in looking at INEC's conduct. Many people think that as long as INEC continues to defend itself, it will continue to escape being held accountable for a bad job when it does one. What do you think?
Well, I think that, generally in our law, it is the person who is asserting a fact that has the burden to prove that fact. If I say that you are guilty of manipulating election results against me, I have to show how that was done and what the result would have been if you had been stopped from manipulating it. So to that extent, it's in our law being an adversarial system of justice for the person who is asserting a fact to prove the existence of that fact. But I think election cases constitute a different scenario. And the reason is this. Under our law, it is INEC that has the responsibility to conduct elections. It has the management of the elections. It prints all the materials. It is INEC that will collate the results. It is INEC that will announce the results. So if you want to prove, for instance, that INEC has not conducted an election properly, you have an uphill task. One of those tasks is that you must be in possession of the materials used by INEC. Because for you to upstage the declaration made by INEC, you must place yourself in the same position with INEC. So where you have a position where the electoral umpire is not independent, or it is partisan, or it is indirectly supporting one party against the other, it will put a lot of booby traps and hiccups on the path of anyone who is seeking to obtain any declaration made by INEC. So this is why we are advocating that the burden of proof should shift to the organization that conducted the election, since it has all the materials. Because for you to upstage a presidential election, you have to go to all the polling units, you have to go to all the agencies that are responsible for the election. And we're talking about
That's actually a huge burden.
In Nigeria.
Thank you.
It's a huge burden.
Yes, it is a huge burden. We're hoping that things will change in the coming years. Thank you very much, Mr. Ebun Olu-Adegboruwa. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Ebun Olu-Adegboruwa, thank you very much.